Okay, I'm going to get us started for the meeting this evening. Thank you for joining us. Our agenda tonight is we'll start with some welcome and just logistics. Our project team, our Austin Water team, will introduce themselves. Then Stephanie will give us a little bit of an operations update, some things that have happened around the plant recently. And then we have our Austin Water team and our consultant team to give an overview of the sound study that we sent out to neighbors recently for you to review. We have plenty of time for questions and answers, and we'll want to hear from neighbors and have a dialogue after that. So just a few logistics here on Zoom. I know everyone's been using Zoom now for a while. If you have any technical difficulties or just want to get some assistance from our team, you can send a chat to the host and panelist, and we'll be glad to try to help you. You also can submit questions. We're going to use the Q&A feature, so it should be on your toolbar, and we'll take questions at the end, but you feel free to type questions in there throughout the presentation, and so when we get to the end of the presentation, we can start answering those. We'll also give anyone who wants a chance to speak, so you'll be able to raise your hand and we can unmute your mic and have a conversation and hear from you directly. All right, so now I'd just like to ask our team to introduce themselves, starting with Stephanie.
Good evening. My name is Stephanie Sue, and I am the operations manager for the water treatment plants with Austin Water.
Hello, Charles Solaro, Austin Water, and I'm the division manager over facility engineering, and this division handles the capital improvement projects at water and wastewater treatment plants.
Hello, my name is Brian Barnett. I work under Charles. I'm the water facility engineering supervisor, and unfortunately, I'm having some tech issues, so my camera's not available today.
Thank you. And hi, I'm Emily Chancellor, and I work in our public information office at Austin Water, and I'm a community liaison for construction projects around the city, and have worked with neighbors here around Ullrich for some time.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Anna Bryan Borja, Assistant Director of Business Services at Austin Water.
Good evening, all. My name is Randy Jenkins. I'm Assistant Director for Customer Experience at Austin Water.
Thank you all. And if you've just joined us, we're just getting started with our agenda. We've introduced our team. And if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the box that says Q&A. Or if you need any assistance from us, any technical issues, feel free to send a chat to the host and panelist, and we'll be glad to assist you. All right, so now I'd like to invite Anna to get us started with the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Emily. And I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. I recognize that there's many competing demands for your time, and I certainly appreciate you taking time to join us tonight to talk about the sound study. Tonight's meeting is part of our commitment to having an ongoing dialogue with the neighbors around the Ullrich Water Treatment Plant. We really want to have open channels of communication with the community. So this evening, first, you're going to hear some updates from our operations manager about recent actions taken at the plant. Then our staff and our consultants will present results of the recently completed sound study. Completing this study is a commitment that we made to the community, and we want to be sure that you have time to ask questions and really have a dialogue with our team and our consultants. So we've built that time into tonight's agenda. And then you're also going to hear about our next steps, which will take this sound study work a step further to evaluate potential noise mitigation measures. So again, we welcome you and we thank you for being here tonight. We do appreciate your participation and your input, and we are working to be responsive to your concerns. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. As Anna mentioned, I am going to provide an operations update of what's been going on at the plant lately. But a quick plant overview. Ullrich Water Treatment Plant is one of 3 City of Austin drinking water plants that's owned and operated by Austin Water. It was built in 1968, and our most recent upgrade was about 17 years ago in 2006. when we increased our capacity from 100 MGD up to our current capacity of 167 MGD. So Ullrich is the largest of the 3 water treatment plants here in Austin. It does provide water because of its location and its size. It's responsible for providing water for South Austin as well as most of Central Austin. And that also includes the community of Westlake Hills. And we do provide water to the residents in the area as well as wholesale customers. Next slide, please. So quick basin cleaning update. As you'll recall, this is an annual activity that we're conducting on our basins. Our goal is to clean each basin once every 3 years. And it is something that's really critical to our operation in that it allows us to ensure that our treatment capability and capacity is upheld. And essentially it allows us to ensure that the equipment that's pretty critical to the treatment process is cleaned on a regular basis, and that we can use our equipment to its highest capacity. This is required because of the fact that we are a lime softening plant. We add lime to our process, and what that does is that calcium carbonate actually accumulates on our mechanical equipment, and it can harden and get thick. And so our goal is to continue to maintain it on a regular basis, and basically clean the basins frequently such that we're able to maintain our treatment capability. Last year, we did clean basins 2 and 4, and that is our last meeting that we had with the community out at Ullrich. It was back in October before we started the cleaning of Basin 2. And we successfully completed cleaning of those 2 basins. And this time around, we were much more strategic on where we placed our equipment. We placed our equipment, the loud compressors and equipment that powers the hydroblasters were placed on the north side of the plant, really intentionally trying to keep that away from the residents on the west side of the west side of the plant. And this time around, we also did install sound panels at the top of the basins, which you'll see those green panels in the top left photo, really with the goal to contain the noise within the basins and to prevent it from traveling off of our property. Next slide, please. Other things that we have done at the plant, back in October, we reported out that a lime blower that is used to basically prevent the lime offloads from being too noisy was back up and running and in service. And we've continued to use that lime blower while our lime trucks are making their deliveries. We've also implemented a requirement for our delivery trucks to be limited in the hours that they deliver, meaning that we do not allow them to offload before 8 a.m. And we also require them to be complete before 5 p.m. So we've put that out to our line providers that we don't want them, the loud noises to be happening before 8 or after 5. One thing that was brought up by the residents in the October meeting was kind of the aesthetics of the construction trailers that we have installed on the west property line of our facility. We did commission and recently complete a cedar plank fence, which you'll see on the top photo, with the intent to provide a visual and a sound barrier right there along that property line, especially for the Rocky River Road area. So that is now installed. Also at the neighborhood meeting, we talked about some noises that were observed in the same area. We did some research and realized that it was actually coming from an HVAC unit on the enclosure of an AT&T cell tower on our site. And so we were able to quickly reach out to AT&T, and they were able to get somebody out there to fix that issue. And so that's kind of a summary of steps that we've taken recently to be a good neighbor and to reduce our impact to all the all of our neighbors that are nearby. I do encourage you to continue to use the 512-972-1000 number. If you do see or hear anything, or have any questions or concerns about what's going on at the plant, I will say that we have these policies in place, but there are times when not, we have to really enforce them with our vendors. So I do, I appreciate the concerns that have been brought up, and what that does is it allows us to know pretty quickly what needs to be addressed. So I appreciate those of you that have reached out so far, and encourage you to also to continue to use that number to reach out to us. And that's all I got. I'll hand it over
Thank you,
to Brian.
Stephanie. Thank you. We'll hand it over to Brian now.
All right. So again, my name is Brian Barnett. I oversee a group that manages CIP projects. And for a project of this nature, we wanted to hire a consultant to help us understand the sound issues that we're producing. So let me give you a brief overview of this study, and we'll kind of talk through our next steps as well. Next slide. So we hired Kennedy Jenks with a sub-consultant of CSTI. They basically were part of a program to try to understand what sounds we were producing. And they also were part of an assessment program to see kind of how the past sounds that have been experienced and were recorded in a previous report, if those are still the same comparable sounds today. So I'll go through that in more detail, but just to give a brief overview, we recorded nighttime sounds that were easily comparable to the 2007 report that also collected sound at night. But in addition to that, we went beyond that report. So we collected sound continuously both day and night. We also were purposeful to measure both sound when normal operations were occurring, as well as when special operations such as the basin cleaning Stephanie mentioned were occurring. So in addition to measuring sound through the air, we also measured ground vibrations to make sure that wasn't affecting neighboring residents. Once we collected all this information, we produced a report that we've shared with you that kind of shows what we've discussed or what we've found. But our next step is then determining the most effective mitigation techniques. And that's going to require additional analysis via a three-dimensional sound model. Next slide. Just to introduce our consultants, Kennedy Jenks is a national multidisciplined engineering and environmental services firm with over 100 years of planning, design, permitting, and construction services experience in water and wastewater treatment facilities. And Kathy Fretwell is vice president at Kennedy Jenks and a senior project manager. And so she was hired to help spearhead this study. Kennedy Jenks partnered with CSTI Acoustics on this noise study for their expertise in noise consulting, which is a very specialized engineering discipline. Next slide. Arno Bomer is the principal consultant for CSTI Acoustics. He's been working in acoustics since 1982, and he's board certified by the Institute of Noise Control Engineering. Next slide. So just to kind of recap, where we started was comparing current sounds to a 2007 study that was done. The locations that study had microphones and recording equipment set up are shown on this map here. And we basically attempted to recreate those sounds to see if the baseline from that time is comparable to the baseline today. So these sound measurements were again conducted by locating devices at 4 locations. 4 days of data were collected from the hours of 4 p.m. to 8 a.m. back in 2007. And this data collection was done in October, which is a slightly different time of year than what the current study recorded. And so consequently, there were quite a bit of insect noises that weren't present during the November study we did. Next. So in addition to the 4 original locations, we added additional spot readings that were further into the neighborhood. This was to help capture a better picture of how sound was propagating throughout the residences in this area. So 3 locations are shown, although many more areas were recorded and provided in that report. And then finally, we knew that there were certain sources of noise due to complaints. And so we targeted recording the sources of those sounds As Stephanie mentioned, there was basin cleaning equipment that we purposefully located on a different side of the facility than previously, but we still recorded the sounds at those equipment locations. There's also a corresponding equipment called a vacuum truck that removes the material pulled off or blasted off by the power washing. And we also recorded the sounds produced while cleaning basin 2 from up top in the basin. And then the only non-basin cleaning point source we recorded was a lime unloading process, both with and without the outdoor truck blower. And so all that information is conveyed to you in the report, which is more than what we've had in the 07 study. Next slide. So where we're going with all of this is collecting that data was step 1. Step 2 is creating a 3-dimensional model of the plant and simulating how that sound propagates. This model will allow us to test virtually different mitigation techniques so that we can find the most effective ones and prove to you that these activities should be helpful in reducing our impact. And then finally, we're going to produce a final report that not only summarizes the noise data that we've collected, but also the recommendations for us. And those might be a mixture of operational changes or capital improvement project changes. So with that, I'll turn it over to the modeling team. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Kennedy Jinks was tasked with leading a sound study as part of the 2019 Small Scale Water and Wastewater Facilities Rotation List. Kennedy Jinks specializes in water treatment infrastructure design, as Brian mentioned. CSTI, Collaboration in Science and Technology Acoustics, specializes in acoustics, noise, and vibration control. Our team worked in conjunction with the plant staff to balance an understanding of the equipment and treatment processes of this large and complex water treatment plant, as well as the intricacies of the sound and vibration which would occur from the plant. The objectives of our work included measuring sound levels for comparison with the 2007 noise data, measuring additional sound levels from the basin cleaning operations, as well as measuring sound reduction achieved by the interior line blower. In addition to these measurements, we also looked at ground vibration levels. For the 2022 noise study at Ullrich, sound levels and vibration measurements were taken at the site over 5 days, starting Thursday, November 17th through Monday, November 21st. The facility was operating under normal conditions while ongoing construction was happening on a new parking lot, which was being conducted on the weekdays. Basin 2 was cleaned during the November 17th and 18th timeframe, and the team was present for lime unloading on multiple days. Now I'm going to turn over the presentation to Arno to talk more in depth with you about sound.
Hello. I'd like to start with talking a little bit about the physics and definitions of sound. Sound consists of propagating variations in air pressure that occur at different frequencies and amplitudes. The frequencies are measured in hertz, and the amplitude or volume is measured in decibels or dB. The A-weighted sound level is abbreviated as dBA, and that's a single number rating of the loudness of sound at all frequencies and is used in many noise ordinances. Sound levels often vary over time, and this can be described by measures such as the maximum level, Lmax, minimum level, Lmin, or equivalent average level, LEQ. Typical sound levels can range from a whisper at 30 dBA to a loud dance hall club at over 100 dBA. People perceive sounds in different ways depending on factors such as the time of day, the presence of tones, the loudness of the sound, and the loudness relative to the background sound. Sounds at the Ullrich site are produced by a variety of sources such as mechanical equipment, water splashing, alarms, and truck traffic. Sound levels in the community are affected by the distance from the equipment, wind conditions, reflections, and walls. Sound can be reduced by sound absorption, noise barriers, and treatments to equipment like silencers. The Ullrich Water Treatment Plant is located within the Austin city limits and shares a property line to the northwest and the southwest with the city of Westlake Hills. The nearest residents to the plant are within the city of Westlake Hills. Austin Water owns the buffer property outlined in blue dashes within the city limits of Westlake Hills. For noise criteria, the Texas state noise limit is a decibel limit level of 85. The City of Austin's Code of Ordinance states that the noise level of mechanical equipment may not exceed 70 dBA at the property line. We were unable to compare sounds from the treatment plant with the City of Westlake Hills criteria, as the ordinance uses frequency bands that cannot be measured with modern calibrated sound level meters. Several sources of noise have been identified during normal operations at the Ullrich plant. Small motors are used for basin mixing and stirring and for water transfer pumps. Basin discharge waterfalls produce a flowing water noise. Noise impacts from transportation sources include trucks that arrive to deliver lime and remove sludge from the facility on a regular basis. Some vehicles in operations are equipped with backup alarms that periodically sound. Routine maintenance and ongoing construction activities occur during the daytime hours on weekdays. Transformers and HVAC equipment also produce noise during operations. Through the treatment process, lime scale accumulates within the basin and on basin surfaces. To maintain operations of the system, each basin requires periodic cleaning conducted by a specialized contractor to remove this lime scale. The pictures shown here highlight the process for basin cleaning. Contractors spray water at high pressure to remove the lime scale. The equipment is shown in the lower left. The water is pressurized with diesel-powered pumps, with up to 4 pumps running at a time, shown in the center. The water and scale residue are then pumped from the bottom of the basin using a truck-mounted vacuum, shown on the right. The sound monitoring was conducted at the same locations as the previous study. On-site west is north of Basin 2, near the diesel pumps used for basin cleaning. On-site southwest is near the fence by Basin 1. Off-site south is near the Ullrich Gate, and off-site southwest is located in the Austin Water-owned buffer property. For the 2022 study, we completed continuous sound monitoring measurements at these 4 sites for 24 hours per day for 4 days, in comparison to only nighttime hours from the 2007 data collection. Additionally, spot measurements were made, including off-site positions at Rocky River Road, Rocky River Cove, and Rocky Creek Drive, shown in light blue. Ground vibration levels were measured at 14 positions around the property line of the site to assess possible vibration impacts. This is shown with the red triangles. The loudest sound sources measured during the 2022 study were all near cleaning Basin 2. These included diesel pumps for the basin cleaning, high pressure spraying to clean Basin 2, the vacuum pump for the basin cleaning, and lime unloading, which is the only operation unrelated to basin cleaning. This table summarizes the sound measurements made at the 4 monitoring sites and 3 community locations. The sounds were from normal operations, which occur 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and are typically below 50 dBA. Lime loading, which occurs during daytime hours for approximately 2 hours per day. We measured lime loading operations conducted with the original process using a truck-mounted blower, and with the current process using a blower inside a building. Basin cleaning operations occur on weekdays during the hours of 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. None of the sound levels exceeded 70 dBA at the off-site sound monitoring site within the buffer or at any of the off-site spot measurement locations. And these are the 5 rightmost columns in the table. Next, this graph shows all the sound monitoring data from November 2022. Each color represents a different monitoring location. The red line is measured in the buffer property nearest the residences. Time goes from left to right over 4 days. Louder sounds are indicated as higher up on the graph. The most important data from this chart are, on the left, you can see high sound levels from the basin cleaning on 2 separate days. The green line shows the sound levels from the diesel pumps at a nearby monitor. The red line shows sound levels of about 65 dBA in the buffer property. There are many brief spikes in the data. These are most commonly from planes flying overhead, though some are from other sources such as sirens or animals. The loudest ones are labeled in the chart. On the right of the graph, you can see sound levels from testing with the blower on the lime truck. As shown with the red line, it produced a sound level of about 57 dBA in the buffer property. When there are no sounds from basin cleaning or truck lime loading, and when the brief spikes from planes and sirens are excluded, the sound levels at all 4 locations are typically 50 dBA or below. In order to compare the 2022 measurements with the 2007 measurements, we plotted the data for one evening from each year. You may recall that the 2007 monitoring was conducted only from 4 p.m. to 8 a.m. each day, and not during daytime hours. For ease of comparison, 2022 data was plotted with the same color for each measurement location that was used for presenting the 2007 measurements. The 2007 data is shown alone with symbols representing each measurement sample. You can see that sound levels increase from about 8 p.m. 2000 until 4 a.m. This is due to the insect sounds at night in October. The 2022 measurements were made in November when there were no insect sounds at night. When we overlay the 2022 data shown with lines over the 2007 data, which is shown with just those points, you can see how the nighttime sound levels were much higher in 2007 due to the insects. If you look to the left and right ends of the graph where there's no insect noise, as we toggle the 2007 data off and on, note that the lower levels for each color, when you ignore the spikes from the planes or sirens, the levels are very similar for the dots in 2007 and the lines in 2022. The blue and red data representing the south site and the buffer site are about 45 dBA. The purple and green data representing the on-site west and southwest locations are about 50 dBA. Okay, as previously noted, the 2007 data was for nighttime only from 4 p.m. to 8 a.m. each night. Next slide, please. The 2007 data was collected in October, and there was insect noise at night. In 2022, data was collected continuously to cover both day and night in November during cool weather without insect noise. The 2022 data included normal operations and basin cleaning operations. During normal operations without insects or planes, sound levels at the 4 monitoring locations were similar for 2007 and 2022. The next figure here shows the approximate distance from the on-site southwest measurement position to different residences. Sound attenuates with distance, and if buildings and topography create a barrier, that also reduces sound levels. Next slide. This figure shows the sound levels measured along Rocky River Road and Rocky River Cove during basin cleaning operations. As shown, sound levels range from 46 to 56 dBA and generally decrease with greater distances from Ullrich. Sound levels may also decrease due to shielding from buildings and topography. There are some effects from foliage and ground absorption, but these are normally minor. Here we show the difference of sound levels 30 feet from equipment to the level measured at the monitor in the buffer area. There's a decrease of at least 27 dBA for each event, which corresponds to over an 80% reduction in the perceptible sound. Additionally, the indoor lime blower reduced the noise from the lime truck unloading operation by about 10 dBA when compared to the truck-mounted blower. Functionally, this represents a 50% reduction in the perceptible sound and a 90% reduction in the sound energy. Next, we're going to talk about vibration. The City of Austin's Code of Ordinance states that earthborne vibration may not exceed the limits shown in the right-hand table at residential area boundary line. The City of Westlake Hills Code of Ordinance limits any vibration to 0.002 G's peak measured at any point beyond the lot line. Ground vibration levels were measured at 14 positions around the property line of the site to assess possible vibration impacts in the vicinity. Measurements were made in the X, Y, and Z axes on metal object on the ground, such as a pipe, shipping container, or similar structure. Ground vibration was not noticeable at any of these locations, and no ground vibration readings had been taken as part of the 2007 data collection. The typical maximum sound levels measured at the 14 positions shown with the blue line met the City of Austin vibration limits shown with the red line. The residences are further away from the site and will have lower ground vibration levels than those measured at the perimeter. Next. As shown in the next chart here, the measured ground vibration level shown with blue line also met the vibration limits of the City of Westlake Hills shown with the red line. In conclusion, the 2022 study observed that typical sounds from the Ullrich facility measured at the buffer property, offsite southwest, ranged from 42 to 66 dBA, while the Austin noise limit is 70 dBA. The indoor lime blower reduced the noise from the lime truck unloading operation by 10 to 12 dBA. Functionally, this represents a 50% reduction in perceptible sound and a 90% reduction in sound energy. The Ullrich facility meets all applicable noise and vibration ordinances. Austin Water's next step on this project will be to conduct 3D computer noise modeling to assess methods to further reduce sound. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy and Arno. Thank you so much for that presentation. So we're going to start now, feedback and questions and answers. I see that we have one person who's joined by phone. So I want to let you know that we will give you an opportunity to raise your hand and speak if you'd like. We wanted to start by getting some feedback. So we now have data about the sound around Ullrich, but we would like this consultant team to hear directly from neighbors. And so I've just started us with a question. And if you could, in the chat, you can send the chat to just the host and panelists if you want it to be private, or you can send a chat to all. If you would just give us a little bit of information about what type of noise or time of day is most disruptive to you and your household, that would be a great input for our consultants to hear directly from you, and just to get our dialogue started. So I'll pause for just a minute for folks to find the chat button and send that in to us.
Emily, I saw someone raise his hand, I think.
Thank you. Yes, I'll get right to that. Thank you. I wanted to go ahead and get to this slide. All right, so I'm going to keep pausing. I'm going to have an awkward pause here for just a minute. So if folks are typing something in, they have a chance to finish their thought. And then we'll start letting everyone who wants to speak. Okay, so we'll keep going. So if you've joined by phone, if you would like to speak, if you would press *9, and then you'll be given instructions, and we'll know that you'd like to speak, and we'll be glad to unmute you so you can speak. So that's *9 if you've joined by phone, and then everyone who's joined from your computer, feel free to type into the chat. Oh, John is telling me chat is disabled. Okay. I'm sorry for that technical difficulty. We will see if we can turn on the chat. May, I don't know if you can kind of work on that, but the Q&A button does work. So if you type into the Q&A, I can see it and I will read it aloud to everyone. So I apologize for that difficulty. John has reported in the Q&A that the cleaning of the basins is the worst noise for his household. Thank you for that feedback. So now I think we're just open for any questions. We have our consultant team here. If you have questions or dialogue, feel free to type into the Q&A as John has started doing, or use the raise your hand, and we'll just hear from everyone who wants to contribute or ask questions. So John has asked, what is the sound guy? Arno, I think that's you. He wants to hear from you. What do you think will happen to sound levels when Basin 1 is cleaned? So I think he's pointing out that you took measurements during Basin 2 cleaning. So do you have any thoughts about what you'd see when the Basin 1 that's closer to the neighbors is being cleaned?
Okay, great. And actually, I have a question for John too. So.
Okay.
My question for him, which he can think about, is he was saying that the basin cleaning is the worst, but there's actually 3 different sounds associated with basin cleaning. So I'd like to kind of get his feedback that's maybe a little more specific. So as we mentioned before, the diesel powered pumps, that's one sound source, which was probably better this time because it was located on the north side. So it was a little better from the community. Now, when they're cleaning basin 1, I think those will be located at about the same location. So that should be about the same. The second type of noise is the actual blasting noise. And that's kind of a high frequency noise. It's basically high pressure water that they're spraying. Occasionally there's a metallic sound because if they're spraying against a thin object, it'll make a little bit more of a ringing sound. That's the sound that when they're cleaning basin 1, it will be a little bit closer to the neighborhood than basin 2. I don't think it'll be a dramatic difference. I would expect it to be maybe 3 or 4 dBA louder, which is, you might notice it a little bit, but it wouldn't be dramatically louder. The third type of noise, which I found interesting when I was there, is that vacuum truck that we spoke about. So the vacuum truck basically sucks out the debris from the bottom of the basins, and it's kind of a drone tone type sound. It's basically a blower that's running in reverse to vacuum things up. So it's producing kind of a tonal sound. So if your main problem is with the noise of the basin cleaning, I'd like to know which of those is the worst sound, whether it's the high frequency from the spraying, the drone tone of the vacuum, or the diesel engine truck noise. Oh, and the vacuum truck will probably be about the same because it may be at the same location. The truck was located for this time right between basins 1 and 2, so it can probably be at the same location when they're cleaning basin 1.
Thank you, Arno. John has added a few things into the chat, into the Q&A. He says the basin 1 is 150 feet closer to the property line. And John, would you like to speak? Can we unmute you so that you and Arno can kind of chat about this? May, will you go ahead and unmute John? And then if he decides he'd rather just type it in, that would be fine too.
Okay, let me do that.
Okay.
Okay, I think I just unmute him.
Okay, so John, you're unmuted. Would you like to just talk with Arno a little bit about this?
Yeah, I'm just curious. It seems to me like that when basin 1 was cleaned, that's when the noise just went through the roof for the whole neighborhood. I mean, it was just horrible. And it was, I call it a brat. It wasn't the drones or a high pitched. It was like a machine gun kind of a. It sounded. I thought it was jackhammers going.
Yeah, it's possible that's when they're doing the spraying at times. Sometimes they're just spraying on concrete, and then it's just that high frequency noise. But when they're spraying on the thinner parts, sometimes it has that different element, and there are actually holes in some of the parts. And when they're spraying in the holes, it'll make a different sound. That could be it, because that was very noisy. That's higher up in the basin as well, so that sound will get out a little bit better. So that's possible. Because I wouldn't think that most people know what the diesel engine sounds like for the pump, and that's just
right.
An engine noise, and that doesn't sound like that. And the vacuum is definitely a tonal sound. So I think it was probably when they were doing the spraying on some of those upper surfaces, especially near those holes. It's a very interesting sound, and that would be louder in that it would be closer to the neighborhood in basin 1. Sometimes when they're working lower in the basin, it might not be worse in 1 because they've kind of got a better barrier effect. That wall at the end of basin 1 is right next to them, which is gonna block the sound well. But up at the higher areas where this noise is being generated, yeah, I can understand that would be a bit louder. So,
I mean,
yeah.
2 things. I mean, one is when basin 2 was being cleaned, basin 1, if I'm not mistaken, was full of water.
That's correct.
You had an extra concrete wall and, basically 150 feet of water to attenuate the sounds. So I think that your assumption that basin 1 is going to be the same as 2 is probably flawed. And the other thing is, because it's 150 feet closer, it basically, whatever levels you were getting at your on-site southwest, is going to be, the levels that would presumably be picked up the offsite southwest when one is being cleaned. Forgetting, just because the distance, forgetting any attenuation because of the extra wall and the water.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much the water is gonna affect things because the sound isn't really traveling through it. It's going over the top. But there's one other thing that I can mention here. For the basin cleaning for number 2, they did put some panels around the perimeter just to increase the barrier effect. Now, it was only 3 or 4 feet tall, so it wasn't dramatic, but it may have had some benefit here. As you mentioned, being 150 feet closer, the way sound works in general is that every time the distance doubles, the sound level goes down by about 6 dBA. So, if you were 150 feet away and now you're 300 feet away, the sound level will go down by 6 dBA. So, there is a definite physics effect.
So the other way of saying that is when you're 150 feet closer, the sound level would presumably go up.
Yeah. So if you were,
is that what you're saying?
Yeah. If you were 300 feet away from basin 2 and now you're only 150 feet away from basin 1, the sound level would go up by 6 dBA. Now,
so when you were measuring on site at sound levels above 70 dB, and basin 1 is going to be 6 dB higher, presumably, is it fair to assume that when basin 1 gets cleaned, you'll be over the 70% or 70 dB?
It's hard to tell just because of the geometry. The site we were measuring at the fence line there is much lower than the basin, and sometimes you're kind of in a shadow zone when you're down low, but next to the sound source that's behind a barrier up high. So that actual fence line position might not be affected as much as, for instance, in the community, when you're 500 feet away, that change in the barrier effect is not going to be as significant. Now, that said, if you're 500 feet away and you used to be 500 feet away and now you're 350 feet away because you moved 150 feet closer, it's not a doubling of the distance as you were seeing from 150 to 300 feet. So it might not be quite that 6 dB effect. Now, there's one other factor which I think could be important here, and I'm sure you neighbors would recognize this, and that's that the wind can have a pretty dramatic effect. So if the wind is blowing from the facility towards the neighborhood, it's going to be louder. And it's possible when they were doing those the blasting of basin 1, if the wind was blowing towards the community there, that can have a pretty dramatic effect and make things much louder as well.
I guess what I'm well, for lack of, I'll just say challenging, is your conclusion is that Ullrich is not violating the city of Austin 70 dB noise limit. And I don't think that's a fair conclusion based upon the fact that you were measuring cleaning that is 150 feet further away. All things being equal, I think that's just not a fair conclusion.
Yeah, I think what I'm saying is that when I measured it at that particular moment, that was true. But the next step we're doing right now is we're going to create a noise model, and this is a 3D model where we put in all the noise sources. And what I can do is actually look at what happens when we're doing the cleaning in basin 1 instead of basin 2, and what is the effect in the community. So we've got all the data now, and we can model these different scenarios. So this will allow us to actually look at, how much louder will it be when they're doing these same operations in basin number 1. So I'm looking at to get us.
Yeah, I was just going to add that exact comment, Arno, that's the whole point of the 3D modeling, is we're going to take the noises at the source from the basin 2 modeling and move them over to basin 1. And then because the model is 3D and it takes into account all the topo on the site and the walls of the site itself, that will be in effect as part of the modeling. And that's why we're going to look at the noise mitigation measures and what are the alternatives and what is the benefit of each alternative. And can we implement those alternatives for the basin cleaning in basin 1 so that we can address your concerns. So that's the whole point of the modeling that Arno is going to lead, is actually addressing your exact concerns taking the data from 2, putting it into basin 1 and simulating what is that sound when it is in basin 1 and closer to your residences, and how can we address those concerns?
Thank you all. I think we've really highlighted this concern about Basin 1. Sean, did you have other specific questions or comments? I want to just move to.
I don't want to hog it.
Yeah,
I
and
did
we
have
can
a
come back to you. I want to give you a chance while you have the mic to maybe address some other topics.
Yeah, the other question I had was the vibration. And I was just trying to understand in the report. It looked like those were just one-time measurements at each location and not done over time. Is that right?
Correct.
And then I'll just follow up. Is the word typical was used in quotations, which implies that there's a definition to that. And I don't know what that definition was based on what was in the report. Was that an averaging? And, there was another conclusion that in the report that said that, since the monitoring was so much further or so much residents are further from the plant than any of the 14 places that were tested. And really, that's not true. When you actually do some measurements, if you do just kind of the center of the plant, there's a lot of residents that are a lot closer than those 14. So I was just trying to understand the vibrations, and because I know that's a huge thing for Doris.
Yeah. Okay. And this can be handled later, but if Doris is the person who's concerned about the vibration and has particular issues, I'd like to hear more about that. The measurements that we measured vibration were encircling the entire plant, so there wouldn't be any house that was closer than at least some of the positions there. Every house would be further than, there would be always a sound monitoring position between any house and the center of the plants. That's what.
Okay. What did typical mean?
What's that?
You said you used the word typical in the report.
Yeah.
I was just kind of understanding there were 14 measurement points. I'm going to assume they were all just a one-time measure rather than like an ongoing. Is that correct?
Let me kind of walk you through the way the measurements were done. So basically, when normal operations were going on, I walked around the perimeter of the site and tried to find a good place to measure at each location. The vibration meter, which has an accelerometer, is on a magnetic mount, and I would find something that I could put that on. So it might be, if there was a manhole cover or something that's directly on the ground, and I would put it on. And then I would try to be able to measure vertical and then in each horizontal direction. There's a problem you have when you put down the magnetic mount, that when you put it down, it kind of bangs against the surface, and it then takes 20 or so seconds to settle. And there were a couple times, I think, when I measured some of these measurements, ended up, when I downloaded the data, they looked high. And I would then look at the next measurement, which is very close by, and the measurements were low. So those are the ones that I discounted, that I think it was just a problem with my measurements, that some of them read a little bit higher because all the other measurements made just before and just after at very similar locations were much lower. So that's why we had to put in that typical, because there were some measurements that were higher. But if anyone has any particular vibration issues, I'd like to look into that a little bit more detail, because what I didn't see any places around the perimeter where there was any vibration where I could feel anything. And based on the operations there, where there isn't a lot of equipment that should be producing high levels of vibration, I couldn't see what would be causing a problem that would extend beyond the site.
Thank you. John, are you able to wrap up for now? And if you want to speak again after others have,
Sure.
We could come back to you. Does that work?
Yep.
Okay, Doris has the next question in the Q&A. And Doris, I'm happy to read these. If you'd like to speak, just click the button. I think it's under reactions, and just raise your hand and we'd be glad to hear from you. The first question I have from Doris is, you say the study was done during normal operations. Was Basin 2 fully operational during this study in 2022?
Yeah, so 2022, Basin 2 was obviously being cleaned, so it was empty. So it wasn't operating normally. I wouldn't expect it to be a major noise source. When these facilities are operating, when the basins are operating, the noise sources associated with them there are some small motors which are at the top, and there's also some waterfall noise. So if they actually have, when they finish the cleaning and go back to normal operations of 2, I wouldn't expect that to have a noticeable effect on the sound levels in the community.
So I think just to recap, Basin 1 was normally operating and was filled with water. Basin 2 was emptied and was being cleaned during these sound measurements. So do I have that recap right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm gonna, Doris has the next question. The 2007 study pointed out the upflow clarifiers were a source of significant noise. I believe from my multiple phone calls to the report phone number would warrant the sound study experts to contact me and work with me for the 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. terrible vibration and staccato noise and sound turning on and off, causing difficulty with sleep for years. So I think this is more of a comment. Doris, if you had a question for our team related to this, maybe you'd like to raise your hand and speak. And then Doris has said, I wish there was a monitor placed by my house instead of my barn. It represents sounds coming from walls from the tunnel where all the lime work is done. May, will you go ahead and just unmute Doris and let's just check in and see if this feedback is what she wanted or if there's other questions she'd like to ask.
Okay, Doris. Okay, I just did. Oops. Okay.
Okay, Doris, if you'd like to speak or ask any questions from the team, you're unmuted, but no pressure.
No, I'm just trying to find where I can look at the
Okay.
same time.
Okay.
That's not there. Trying to look at the Q&As from John as well at the same time. So I think I've made myself very clear with my comment is I need a sound study person to contact me so we can work with when the sounds are occurring, when they're turning off and on, to get some coordination so we can truly identify what the problems have been. I mean, we know the old PE said, there's no way we can do anything about the sound that we hear in your bedroom when they all came into my bedroom and such. But I do believe that if 2 human beings can communicate, I call the report number and I get nothing other than there's no new sounds. These aren't new sounds. I've been dealing with this ever since the water treatment plant expanded. Never did I call prior to the expansion of the water treatment plant. So I need a human being with good communication skills to work with me so we can resolve some of these problems. I still have a problem. It's great. It's been known for years. So I don't want to be treated like I'm just making a statement.
Understood. Yes. And we are here tonight to have this dialogue. And so you can give input to our consultant team and our Austin Water team and ask questions. We're here for that tonight.
There needs to be a relay like there used to be back in the old days when I could call the 2 guys that were in the building, because then they would be like, that's not on a demand switch. We can't turn that off or whatever. And there was some communication figures, and I'd call and say, it's 2:30, something just turned on. It's hard to sleep when there's a certain amount of noise and then something turns on and off. And look at your 2007 study. The upflow clarifiers are waterfalls. They are not continuous white noise they have a staccatic, quality. And it's probably because you have more than one waterfall going at a time. I don't really know. But for you to take out one of the two largest basins that are close to me and call this a good study just doesn't sound plausible to me. And again, I welcome someone to start some dialogue so we can get to the bottom of this. And again, my house lines up with the tunnel, which obviously those two walls, when the trucks go into the line, create a noise. And if you're lined up with the tunnel, that's sound, that's air noise. But the vibration stuff is intolerable. I have gone with sleep deprivation for so long. I'm sure some of my neighbors have seen me slur my speech from lack of sleep. So I'm not making a comment. I'm making the same request that I have made to you, Emily, by emails and phone calls for quite some time, and through my city and city council, and through the Austin American Statesman newspaper article, and through the letter that used to be Senator Kirk Watson, who is now your mayor, responded because of my lack of sleep, because of the water treatment plant. This is not new stuff. I'm tired of being ignored.
I wanted just to ask if anyone on our Austin Water team wants to speak. So we certainly, I definitely can represent everyone and say that we're here tonight to have that dialogue, to hear from you, to respond. We brought our consultant team. So I don't want to speak for you. We're recording the meeting and we will take notes of all of your feedback. Yeah. I do understand your concern that Basin 1 and 2 were not fully operating during the sound measurement. So I think we'll take note of that. I know that the team wanted to record during one of the basin cleanings, and so that was part of the strategy. But that did mean that both of them weren't operating. And so we're here for the dialogue and to hear from you and to answer questions.
So are you telling me that this is my one-shot chance in a snapshot period of time to get help, when I'm telling you this goes on, noises of different kinds, 24/7? And I sit very close. If you need to see, I will be glad to send your experts from the drone view of how close, especially after devegetation of the quote unquote buffer zone, I am, and that the solid rock that we share. I do not want to feel like after I'm just getting home from out of town, from a family emergency, to feel like this is my one-time shot. I need someone I can call when it's going on and off so that they can coordinate and start figuring this out, and when the vibrations are going on. But I'm going to tell you, the 2007 study pointed out the upflow clarifiers. Instinctively, it kind of makes sense, especially when I went over there to look at the water treatment plant. It makes sense that that's very possible. But you, Emily, would never entertain that when I would point that out. You would just say to me, there's no new noise. I'm not saying there's a new noise. I've been putting up with this for a really long time.
Hi, Doris and all. I'd like to chime in. Thank you so much for your feedback.
Who's this speaking?
This is Randy Jenkins, Assistant Director.
Yes.
And so I met you and others at our last community meeting. So I want to start off by saying this will not be your last opportunity for feedback. This is a continuation of a multiple series and a commitment from Austin Water to continue to meet with the neighbors that surround the Ullrich treatment plant. So I want to start with that. Secondly, Emily is in essence our liaison and our individual who helps us prepare these community meetings. So, I want to, set the stage for Emily's role in this And then lastly, I would add that, and I'd like Arno to maybe, and Kathy to maybe chime in, but since we have the basin for basin 1 noises, so this is a question maybe I have, since we have basin 1 noises, and we are going to next step move forward with modeling. And you mentioned, modeling basin 2's cleaning in basin 1. Could we also then replicate basin 1's routine normal operations in basin 2 to just get baseline noises and noise mitigation strategies for just a routine day with no basin cleaning? Is that an option? Is that something you're planning to prepare?
Yeah, we can certainly be adding the operations, but I think simply adding that isn't going to address this. I think, this type of sound, I need to think a little bit more about. One thing that I'm wondering about is, are there very specific logging devices at the facility that say when things turn off and on? Because if we could try to, correlate what's going off and on at specific times, where Doris is hearing things go off and on, that would help us really figure out what's happening. We'll go ahead and we'll do that. We'll add the sound of having both basins 1 and 2 running normally. But I'd like to have some way of diagnosing a little better what exactly is causing the situation there. And that might be one way of doing it, is trying to check with logs of things turning off and on, if that's possible.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was going to say that we do have SCADA information from our, sorry, there's an alarm going off. We do have SCADA information for that.
Thank you all for joining in and providing some additional responses. Let's see. I'm going to see where we're going next. I think, Doris, if there's something else that you'd like to talk about now in this meeting, and I do apologize, and thanks, Randy, for jumping in. Yeah, I didn't mean this is the only chance. But Doris, I think I'm not sure if I've read everything in the Q&A, but I'll just read this last one to make sure. I wish there was a monitor placed by my house. Oh, I did read this one. Instead of my barn, it represents sounds coming from walls from the tunnel where all the lime work is done. Okay. So I also have in the Q&A, Randy has said, I agree, cleaning is the most disruptive sound. I'm on Rocky River Cove. Worst sound is drone tone from the vacuum truck, I guess, is what he's said here. And then I just want to comment, I think we have a couple of people who've joined by phone, and if you'd like to speak, please press *9 so we can unmute your line, and we'd love for you to join the discussion here. And we have another member of our Austin Water team, Anna, who I will recognize now. So Anna, are you able to unmute yourself, or do we need to do something there?
Yeah, I thought she is unmute already.
There you are.
Okay.
Go ahead, Anna. We'd love for you to jump in. We can't hear you, Anna. I can't. Do you have earbuds maybe that are connected? I'm still not hearing you. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
There you are, Anna.
Oh,
now I hear you.
Okay. I don't know what happened. I wanted to chime in, and I've been talking for a while to myself. I apologize to all. But But yeah, I'm Anna Brian Borja, Assistant Director of Business Services. I think that it is really important for Arno and Kathy to hear the comments that Doris and John were providing earlier, and to really think about that, think about how in the next phase, if they can model some of the things that we've been talking about, or think about how the data they've already collected can be, applied to these problems that are being identified. I guess a question I had for our consultants is, in the 3D modeling, is there anything more you can say about what we can all expect to come out of the 3D modeling? Like, for example, does it just model what's happening on the plant site? Does it model how sound is traveling outside the plant site? Because I think that kind of gets to maybe some of the discussion that was being had earlier about how sound would travel from basin 1 versus basin 2. So could you just give us a better idea of what might come out of that modeling?
Yes, what we can do is we can look at different scenarios of operations. So we can look at, having all of the different basins operating normally. We can look at cleaning at different facilities, like doing the cleaning of basin number 1. When we create this model, we put in the different sound sources, and then the sound model then projects those sounds within the site, but also out in the community. So it'll calculate how loud it is, and it presents it kind of in a map form with different colors for different sound levels. The second thing that we can then do is look at different types of treatments and what the possibility is. For instance, people have talked about noise barriers. So we can say, if you put a noise barrier at this location and it's 12 feet tall, what is the effect? If it's 20 feet tall, what is the effect? So it's also going to let us look at different options for noise control. So it will let us see what the benefits are in the community of different operations and different treatments. That said, the most important thing for a model is having all the good input data. And I'm concerned we might be missing something here with Doris of some sound that's happening that I don't know about yet, so I can't put in the model. So that's I think the next step I need to figure out is what sound I might be missing in my modeling, and making sure we put it in there, because in order to have a good model, we need to know every sound, and that'll be the next step to look at.
For me, that's helpful to hear. And I think just noting also, you had described there are 3 different types of sound that come off of basin cleaning. Will the modeling or the treatment recommendations address like different types of treatments to address different types of sound?
Yes. So each of those will have a different possible method of treating it. So some of them might be, for instance, with that vacuum truck, maybe it would be possible to have some sort of a barrier in the area where the truck sets up that would work to shield the noise from the community. For the actual cleaning itself, there have been concerns with sound bouncing off the tall lime building. So the question is whether some sound absorption, some locations might help with that. So we'll look at different types of treatments for each source individually.
Thank you. There is a question here that John put in. He asked, were the upflow clarifiers running when vibrations were measured?
Yes.
So the answer to that is yes, they were running during vibration measurement. Okay. I don't see any other questions unless I missed any. So I'm going to pause for folks to put in questions or raise your hand if you'd like to speak. Okay, I see a new one from Doris. Looking at the green panel on top of basin per your picture, it appeared the panels were shorter. The gentleman like 3 to 4 foot. How tall are the panels since the basin walls are 150 feet high? So I think I can go back to, this was part of Stephanie's update, and show that photo. Let me see.
And they were, I think they were about 4 feet tall, because they were hanging on the handrails of the basin. I think it's from earlier on in the slides.
Okay, there we go. I tried to get back without making y'all dizzy. There's the photo. So that shows those panels were hanging on a railing that exists, right?
Correct.
Okay. I'm just kind of pausing here to see if there's more questions that are coming in or more folks who'd like to speak. And I think Anna helped us get a recap on the next step, but Kathy, I'm going to ask you to do that before we close the meeting, if you would. And Brian and Charles, if you want to contribute to that, maybe get yourselves ready for that. I'm just kind of waiting to see if there's other questions or other folks who want to speak. So Doris says, I think more can be done than a 4-foot panel, question mark.
So I would chime in and say that Austin Water agrees that more can be done, and that's the purpose of the 3D model, so that we can evaluate what would be the best solution for the different sources of noise. That way we don't invest money or time with a solution that isn't going to deliver to the community that surrounds Ullrich. So that's, we think, we agree with you, more can be done, and that's what we're here to talk about. So I think that's great. So yeah, walk us through next steps.
We have another question, Randy, before we get to that. So John says, are there still day versus night allowable noise levels? So I think that's maybe going to the regulations. So Kathy, or Brian, or one of you the best to address that?
I think Arno has spent the most time looking at the codes, so I think he can speak to that.
Okay.
Yeah, we were mostly looking at the Austin code, which is the 70 dBA, and it actually is the same code daytime and nighttime. Obviously, people are more sensitive at nighttime, and we're looking at trying to get sound levels, lower, even though 70 isn't what we're shooting for. We're shooting for trying to get them lower than that as well, with sensitivity to nighttime sounds. But that is the noise ordinance for Austin is a daytime or nighttime regulation for mechanical equipment.
Thank you, Arno. All right. So I don't see other questions, but if another one pops up, I'm gonna make sure we answer it before the end. So why don't we, Anna, did you have something to contribute? Kind of anyone on the team who'd like to speak? And if I misread your camera coming on, then that's fine. I'll go to Kathy. All right, Kathy, can you just recap the next step with the model and what neighbors can expect?
Okay, so the next step is we're utilizing all the information that was collected at the exact sound sources that Arno collected as part of the noise study. That those noises will be distributed to each of the individual sites or the issues that have been brought up by the community. It was very good to hear from the community on the things that are related to their concerns, because I think that helps us inform our noise mitigation measures. So we'll be looking at each of the individual sound sources as part of the model, and then looking at alternatives to further reduce the noise mitigation. To address Doris's concern, I wanted to go ahead and have a discussion about the fact that 4-foot panels. There was a big investment by Austin Water to address the concerns of the community without really knowing how that was going to mitigate the sound. We hadn't done the study, we hadn't done the noise modeling, so there was no way to assess, what size panels were needed and where the panel needed to be. That's why we're going to do this noise modeling effort, but Austin was very concerned with trying to do everything they could to mitigate the noises during this cleaning. That's why they moved the equipment to behind the basin. That's why they did invest and put those panels up. So there is an effort there that they're going to continue to figure out what is the best alternative. And that's part of the noise modeling efforts that we're going to do. Once the modeling is complete, we'll produce a report, and that I think will also be shared with the public, and there will, from my understanding, be another presentation on that modeling effort.
That's right, Kathy. We certainly intend to come back to the community with that information, and we're always available for dialogue, for a phone call. We'll respond by email. So tonight we had our full team together for this presentation and Q&A, but we're always here and always available. We do have another question. Can you assure me that the vibration monitor was on 11 p.m. to 5 a.m.? Doris says, my daily log was that it was loud Tuesday and Wednesday, November 14th and 15th. So Arno, I think you mentioned that the vibration measurements were done, not monitored over time, but were done at a particular time. Were they done during the daytime or at night for those vibration monitors?
That was just during the day for a period, getting all the data for all those positions over several hours. So there was no long-term continuous monitoring of vibration. It was just the spot measurements. So
okay.
Have that long-term measurements like we did with the sound.
Right.
I guess
So
additionally on the 14th and 15th, that wasn't part of the study. The study started on the 17th. It was the 17th through the 21st. So if there was something specific happening on the 14th and 15th, that would have been captured in the study because the study started on the 17th.
Thank you for providing that information. May, I know you're checking me to see if I missed any comments, so please speak up if I did or if anyone has their hand raised. I have put up on the screen our contact information. I know it was mentioned earlier in the presentation, 512-972-1000. That is our 24/7 customer service dispatch line. So that's who our customers call if they have an issue with their service. And our Assistant Director, Randy Jenkins, who you heard from earlier, as well as Anna Brian Borja, have worked to set up a system so that if neighbors have concerns about noise or anything at our plants, and any of our plants, including Ullrich, they have it set up so that that information will be sent to our operations team and will be sent to them and our executive team members. So we've tested that out, and that system is in place so that the information can get to the right people as quickly as possible. You're always welcome to contact me, but I am not 24/7, even though I try to be as responsive as I can. So calling that number is very helpful for us to get the information and be the most responsive. So I always feel awkward at the end of these because I don't want to end too early, but then if we're just sitting here staring at me, then that's kind of boring for everyone. So, okay, there's another comment. Okay, so Doris says, that's the reason for your logs and communication. Correction, it was loud November 15 and 16, and I have other days. Okay, thank you for that feedback. It was 15th and 16th. Okay, so I want to really thank you all for spending your evening with us this evening. It's been very helpful to hear from you directly, and there's more work to be done, and we will be in touch for our next opportunity to get together, report progress that we've made, and to also hear from you. So I think I'm calling it and saying good night, and thanks again.